right, should we get going? I think we're gonna get going. All right, I'll slide in the frame here. So everybody, I'm at Joel Wilkens' shop, and we're doing more of the maple fingerboards business. It occurred to me after we'd done this, that there was a couple different ways to do maple fingerboards. One is to replicate the fender technique of squirting your lacquer all over the top of the board, and then buffing it out, all that kind of good stuff. And then there's the finishing the board first and then putting the frets in second. Joel, I talked to him a little bit about it before we got going, and he's a little confused about why some people have problems with it. So we're probably, Doug, if you hear some stuff and you're like, I don't understand how that works or whatever, we should probably start talking about maybe some of the differences of maybe types of finish, maybe application of finish or something. I don't know. But so when I talked to Joel, he's like, oh, I just put them in. So we're gonna witness that though. So if you see something where you're like, hey, wait, what's going on there? It's anybody chime in and all that kind of stuff. So couple announcements. This is probably the last inking for maple fingerboards that I've got cooking. So we need some ideas for what next month's inkings is going to look like. I did a poll a while back asking if people wanted to branch out from the finished stuff, and that was overwhelmingly replied to as yes, we would like to branch out from just the finished touch-up stuff. So if you feel like shooting me an email on stuff that you would like demoed or just points of interest or things that maybe are going on in your shop that you're like, boy, I could use some guidance on this, just hit me with an email. And then other announcements, Iris Carr is coming up, is the next AMA. And so Joel Wilkens and I are doing a Friday night live thing on YouTube now. And we're probably going to go over some of the pictures on her website and on her Instagram of some of the stuff that she's up to, and put together a list of questions and stuff that we're thinking about. So if you want to join that live stream, we do it at 8 p.m. and you can hang out in the chat and put your 2 cents in on stuff that we're looking at, and maybe come up with some questions of your own for Iris Carr. Really looking forward to that one. So, all right. Anything else? Joel, am I missing anything? Anything on that stuff? All right, cool. So without further ado, we're going to talk about maple fingerboards now. So Joel, did you have anything planned, or you want me just to start asking you questions about it?
Don't really have much planned. I got to switch cameras
Okay.
real quick so you guys can see what I'm talking about if you want to.
Oh yeah.
All right.
So can I make an observation, maybe kick things off? When I look at this finish, the first thing I notice is you don't have a lot of surplus finish on it. Would you say this is fairly thin?
This is probably 8 coats of Stumac gloss clear out of the rattle can. And it was I don't know, I sanded it down to maybe 1,000 grit, 1,200 grit, something like that. It didn't really have much of a finish on there before, but I was just smoothing it out. One thing I did just in particular for today, this was a new neck, goes straight out of Asia. It's really junk. But to kind of simulate what it would be like working on a vintage neck, I really aggressively rounded these corners over. I would say it's maybe if you were to take an 1/8 inch round over bit and go over the edge of the board, that's probably about what it's like right in this area, which is a little different than fretting up to something that's in a really sharp edge.
A nice crisp. Yeah. If you were dealing with a vintage guitar, would that aggressive bevel be something that was worn into it or
Yeah.
put into it in the
Yes,
factory?
I'm sure
Okay.
it's worn into it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I sanded it down. I put a finish on it. It has not been sanded or buffed as far as the finish is concerned, because this is basically what I would want to see if I was refinishing a vintage guitar board. Not that I ever really would want to, but
So you would buff this, you would buff it afterwards or?
this I wouldn't even touch.
Okay.
It has a little bit of that sunk into the grain, kind of very fine line, sort of surface finish to it. It looks really good, actually, for a vintage guitar. So
How recent was this?
I'm sorry?
Recently was this finish applied?
This past week.
Okay.
So it's fairly, in terms of lacquer, nitro lacquer cure, it's not exactly green, but it's not, you know, not full cure by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, I mean, I would say last coat I put on it was probably 3 days ago.
So, and this was the Stumac rattle can?
Yep.
Clear glass. And that, in my experience, is like probably some of the most forgiving lacquer I've ever worked with. Like it's both not too hard, not too soft. It's got a lot of good flow out stuff in it where you can like I'm sure the pattern that you put on here being rattle can, it was probably pretty spattery and you got a, you know, it laid out into something fairly nice.
It was not actually. I lay on really heavy coats. So it looks like a lake.
Okay.
After I spray it on, and I'll spend the next 10-15 minutes just kind of moving the neck around just in my hand, so it doesn't form any drips or pools or anything like that.
Yeah, that's a good dance. You get it real close to your nose so your brain cells activated.
What brain cells?
All right. So okay. So not buff to a high gloss, but we're putting the frets in.
Yeah.
And do you do anything to prep the slot before it goes in?
I ran the normal fretting saw through here just once real quick in each slot.
Is that the Japanese one with the
No.
depth stop or?
No, the standard one.
Okay.
I think I feel like it has a little thinner curve to it.
Does it have the depth stop one or?
It is the depth stop one. I didn't have the depth stop on it because I wasn't really concerned about that.
All right, cool. Let's should I switch to the camera up there to press one in, or do you want to talk a little bit more about this?
I mean, basically what I would do at this point is I have, you know, pre-radiused, pre-cut frets. And if these did not fit in here, you know, to the point where they would kind of hold themselves, you see how far that fits down in.
Yeah, let me switch.
Damn.
Let me see here. You want to? So could everybody see that? Like he's probably about halfway through the barb, something like that.
It's just touching the barbs.
Just touching the barbs. All right.
So I'll lay 3 or 4 in there like that. Just kind of press them in by hands. And I always cut these with pretty excessive length over the ends, just because I'm lazy.
Can I switch to? I'm going to switch the other one.
So I have this press bolted down to the table. It's just pretty significant amount of force on the frets when I put them in. This is shaking.
What's that? Oh, the camera? Just because I moved it. There we go. You want the other one?
I have a pair of pliers. I have the frets in, gonna cut the fret ends off and then bevel all these. Without trying to take too much of the finish or the wood or anything like that with it.
Can I ask, are you ever tempted to hammer the ends around that bevel?
Yes.
Yeah.
In some instances, you'll need to. This, is kind of a faux worn board. The actual radius is very clean. It's just at the end it rolls over. Like on a 70-year-old guitar, you will find all sorts of inconsistencies all over the place. So there are instances where I'll again, one of the reasons for leaving these tangs long is gives you a little something to hammer on.
Yeah.
What I would do before doing that most of the time is put some glue in the slot so it doesn't pull up anywhere else.
Yeah.
But
Who asked that question?
Connor, me.
Oh, Connor. Okay.
Yeah.
Connor, just as a contrasting opinion on that, I almost always, especially on unbound boards, I almost always pre-bend my any radius, like funky radius overbend that I got to get out of it. I almost pre-bend, always pre-bend in. But
I don't know that you would ever be able to get it accurate enough on just the last little 1/8 of an inch or whatever, where it takes an extra bend to do it. But that's me.
Cool.
So I love these guys, these Stumac fret cutters. What I will do when cutting these off, I don't know if you can see, I'm holding these at an angle to the fretboard, so it's not perpendicular. It's not cutting it straight, it's cutting it at the angle that I'm going to bevel it at. So it's just saving myself some time and effort. And I'll take it and put it all the way up against the fretboard and then move it back maybe 0.010 of an inch. So it's not actually going to cut into the wood or anything like that.
sometimes you cut it really close too. You get like a funky tang.
Yeah.
You get a wonky tang.
Okay.
Hey, Joel,
Yes.
it didn't look like you over radiused your fret wire. Is there any reason to over radius, or do you guys like to over radius in some cases?
Personally, I don't most of the time. I'll do it as close as I can get it. If there's a situation where I need to hammer frets in, I find it useful sometimes to over radius, just
Okay.
because it seems when I'm hammering it in, it kind of unradiuses, if you will.
Okay, thank you.
But for something like this where the fretboard is perfect in terms of its radius, and I'm using a press, no, I don't see any benefit.
Thank you.
All right, so these are all cut. I don't know that there's a particularly good way of me showing that they're cut at a bevel, but they are. And So, I mean, this is probably the standard fret beveler, and I hate it. I think it sucks, and I never use it. I'll go with a fret leveler like this and sort of match my own bevel to whatever I think it should be, because it varies from guitar to guitar and player to player. You know, some players that I know really like the fret ends almost straight up and down, and you know, who knows? It's not for me to argue.
Some of the older, rolled over boards too, like if you were to bevel it with that 30-degree bevel and then also not touch the, not blast through the finish on the edge of the fingerboard, your bevel would be way inside the string or inside the string lie.
Yeah, which that happens too. I'm just trying to keep an eye out, make sure I'm not touching the wood anywhere, finish anywhere, and just sort of feeling how much these frets are still shooting from the neck. And that's getting really close. So at that point, I'm going to switch over to a diamond leveler, I guess.
Is that DMT? Looks like DMT.
No idea.
Ooh.
Excuse me, gents. What grit do you reckon that one is? Is that the extra fine?
No, it's
this
pretty
is
aggressive.
probably extra coarse. If I had to guess, I would say this is 600 grit, maybe.
Can I see the edge of that really quick?
Yeah, sure.
It just says coarse on it. Or no, it does. It says extra sharp, and this is from Dynasharp or Diasharp. So not DMT.
Yeah, that's maybe like a 300 or something.
Pretty aggressive. Yeah, it looks about like the like a fret file, diamond fret file.
I'm just touching the wood in there, which, quite frankly, I'm fine with. And this is, what do you say? 1600?
This is getting down. So according to the edge of this, it says fine, Diasharp fine. So to me, that feels like probably 1,000, I would say.
Yeah, okay.
Maybe less. What do you think?
What if it felt finer than that?
Like 15?
Yeah, something like
Let's
that.
call it 15. We'll split the difference and go 12.
This is getting to the point where the dust that's coming off of the fret fills up in the little voids next to the tang. So you get a good visual representation of how much space there is left.
Do you think we can zoom this camera in to get that? So one of the things I'm thinking about these diamond plates, I didn't know they sold them that small, but like with the files, you wind up getting that kind of what is it, that like kind of like fine paper that kind of digs into the board. You know what I'm saying? Like it kind of turns to foil, and then sometimes you can press hard enough to kind of dent that foil into the board. Does the diamond leveler kind of alleviate that a little bit?
Not really.
No, so does it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's generally speaking the process. They're pretty close. I have a little ways to go. I probably cut a little bit deep on that fret right there. There's the sort of cutting marks down into the fret that you were talking about.
Uh-huh.
Want to cut a little close with that, but they'll come out with a little more filing.
So if you do make it through a little bit of the finish into the wood,
Mhm.
is that just a matter of coming back and doing a little touch up afterwards, or do you kind of let it ride?
It depends on the guitar. I mean, virtually every guitar I'm working on has no finish there.
Yeah.
So for me, it's not a big deal. On a very natural color finish like this, if you came back with some oil, like a tung oil or something, and poly mix something like that and rubbed it in, it would look pretty much identical to everything else here. I wouldn't come back in with lacquer at this point.
What about some people get pretty crazy filling the gap between the tang and the bottom of the slot. Are you a filler or no filler?
If I had been the one to cut these fret slots, they wouldn't be this deep. This is courtesy of China or whoever made this board. But yeah, I normally don't need to worry about that. And if this wasn't my guitar, like my fault, whatever, I'd probably ask the client, see what they wanted me to do. Personally, I'm not that worried about it.
How would you got any good fill tips for what would the first thing you would grab for something like that be?
Probably wood flour and something.
Wood flour?
Yeah, not what it's called.
The like wood dust?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So like maple dust and tight bond or something, or
something like that.
cool.
Yeah. I don't know how much time you want me to spend on this.
Mostly I just want to kind of see, did you want to talk about crowning afterwards and maybe how you wind up controlling? Are you a tape guy? Would you tape this whole board off?
Assume for a moment that this was a vintage guitar. No, I would not.
Yeah.
Assume that it's a fresh finish. No, that I would not. No, I would not put tape on this.
Okay. So how can you go kind of how you would protect yourself from chattering up the fingerboard? Are you a triangle file guy? I see a triangle file over there.
These are all fret end files.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, at this point, I would come in and level them. For shits and giggles.
Oh, I hear one. I hear one in there. He's proud.
They're not that bad. As far as crowning, I didn't have this stuff with me.
You want me to grab it? Anybody have any questions so far? Andy, did you 3D model a fret yet? I can't hear you. You're muted.
A fret in particular? No, not yet, but I can.
How was the class?
It was very, very good indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Hot stuff coming through.
It was a lot of hard work. My brain melted by the end of it. Yeah.
Were you guys hands-on? Were you like, Tom was on a computer, you were on a computer, or were you watching?
Yeah, all making our own things and trying our own designs and whatnot. It was great.
So I'd have a question. Like, it might have been covered in previous Maple refred video. I haven't seen all of these, but what I come across lots is like 70s scrap and 70s tellies.
Yeah. Hold on one second, Connor. Joel had to dip for a second. I want him to hear this. So he deals with more of this stuff for me.
Yeah.
All right. Can you repeat that, Connor?
Well, I was just going to ask, if you come across a guitar with a maple board, like I see a lot of 70s ones, are you ever tempted to try and stabilize the lacquer on the board before you do a refret? Like what I find myself doing is if the lacquer's chipping and falling off, I'm just saying we're refinishing it. But some of them are borderline. And I feel like if I had a nice way to stabilize some of the chippy lacquer, I could do that.
I mean, you can certainly do something to stabilize it, you know, CA, even just putting lacquer underneath it. I assume what you're talking about is going to be some kind of poly if it's that thick and chipping and so forth.
Yeah, the 70s kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, the poly, I think, yeah.
All right, so
Tell us a little bit about this file.
this file has been with me for probably 25 years. That would be my guess. I don't know. This is the only one I ever remember buying, sort of the original diamond file from Stu Mack, and they've made a lot since then, and all of them suck. So I keep using this one, even though it's starting to get worn down. This one happens to be 300 grit.
Do you use both grits or do you just use the 300?
I use both grits, depending on how far down I've had to level them. And sometimes that can be quite a lot if you're taking up fretboard inconsistencies with the tall frets, you know.
Yeah. That comes up a lot on the vintage stuff. How many, like, how bad does the neck have to be on a vintage instrument before you plane the board?
Really bad.
Like would you say there's like, so say you put 40, you know, almost everything like this, you're gonna be putting in 80 by, is that right? Like 80 by 80 width fret wire?
Anywhere between probably 85 and 95.
And Jessica, like, I think you can get like 80 by 55 now. So that's, what would be the least amount of fret you would say is passable when you were done with a fret job? Like if you were trying to take out a consistency just out of it.
Depends where on the guitar it was. I mean, most often in Fender necks, you're going to end up taking a lot of fret material off of here because of the way they ramp and whatever. And, you know, you don't need a lot of fret left back there. Maybe 25 thousandths.
Yeah.
Like that.
So I noticed you going side to side with the file motion too, almost.
A little bit. I go a little bit angled that way, a little bit angled that way. For the most part, I go over the center first and then just a couple strokes that way, a couple strokes that way. And I file these off until there's no mark left down the middle.
So not a big land guy.
No.
So say your fret was lower and you were doing that, would you do anything to guard when you're fret filing, or?
The depth of the sort of the concave crown, whatever here, it may be 15 thousandths.
Yeah.
As long as you keep this straight, it will never touch the fretboard.
Never touch the board.
Yeah. So no, it's not something I'm worried about.
Yeah.
And then we're on to my favorite fret polishing tool. Again, it's got that sort of matching crown shape to the top of the fret.
Yeah.
And just take a piece of sandpaper,
2,500.
wrap it around, hold it really tight.
How many different grits would you use for this? Or you one grit
Normally I'd start somewhere around 1,000.
and then work up to 2,500? Maybe
Yeah.
with a 2,000 in between or 1,500 in between?
Yeah. But I mean, you can see
Yeah. That's one of the nice things about those the diamond fret files get better with age, I feel, like right up to the point that they quit working, but.
The other thing I didn't do was bevel the fret ends, which I would have done before doing this,
Okay,
but
do you want to show a fret end?
yeah, I mean, this is I think they still sell the same exact thing. This is their fret end file, which has got a rounded edge, sort of safety edge on one side. And the way I go about doing these is coming in at sort of a 45 to the board and a 45 to the fret itself, and just kind of sort of follow the bevel around until you're going exact opposite angle to the fret and to the board, if that makes sense. So you come up, kind of move your sort of path around that way. I won't go all the way to the board. I'll start on this side and move my way back. And I'm doing this at an awkward angle for the camera.
That's all right. I think we're getting it.
But that is the idea. Probably go over it 3 or 4 times each way.
Is that fret file or the fret end file, is it concave or anything, or is it just flat with a round on it?
It's just flat with one side rounded over.
Okay.
So you can really run it up on the fretboard itself, and it's not going to chew into anything. It's nice.
So Joel, do you have the rounded side facing down towards the fretboard or
Yep.
facing up?
Yeah, it's touching the fretboard at the moment on that side, and then I'm taking it over to the side of the fret and doing the exact opposite motion. It goes pretty fast.
What's your favorite part of the fret job?
Being done. I hate fretting.
Oh, you do?
Hate everything about it.
The one thing I can still stand to do for some reason, it's weird though, because it's got everything that I normally hate in things: tediousness, repetition.
So, I mean, that's the gist of it.
So do you hit that now with?
Yeah. So when I'm coming back to polish the frets, I will polish the fret itself, and then I will angle this over the fret end, and it polishes up, and any fret file marks out of that pretty nicely.
And that gets that through all the grits as well then.
Yeah.
Cool. Do you polish the fret ends? Like, do you run sandpaper over the fret ends?
The diamond file is usually good enough.
Good enough. So it's gonna but you're not going for that super mirror.
No. Although this will get there if you want it to.
Yeah.
Do you usually tape off the fretboard when you're doing that?
No, I don't tape off anything. I'm just careful.
Do you have any advice to people who are careful but still fuck things up?
Use the right size of one of those.
Okay.
That'll allow you to get at least the top of it and maybe a little bit of the bevel. But it gets in the way, and I think it's a pain in the ass. So my advice is to be careful. I mean, it's really just a matter of practice and going slow. You get a handle on it after a while, and it is what it is. There's, I don't know, not much to it.
Cool. Anybody have any questions? Doug
So are
doesn't
those
hear.
frets? Oh, I have a question.
Yeah.
So are those frets pressed right down onto the finish?
Yes.
You never had issues with cracking or anything like that?
No. not at all.
So hold on a second. I'm removing the spotlight really quick. Can you say that again? Who asked that question?
That was me, Tyler.
Tyler. Yeah, one of the things I will say, and just in looking at this, is the finish that he's produced here is remarkably thin. The other thing too is the Stumac finish is the rattle can finish is also so the same before. It's super duper forgiving, and interestingly, I think it's hard enough that it's not like deft or something where it's like super feels real gooey when it's gone off, but it also, like, I think you could force check it, but it doesn't want to
Yeah, at this thin of a finish, it will probably never check. This is not what I would normally use for a vintage finish. I have my own lacquer. It was just this was convenient, but this is great for any other kind of fretboard, maple fretboard you're doing. But one thing I bet you deal with pulling frets out of vintage maple guitars is you're probably not trying to touch the finish that's on there at all, I'm assuming. And
Right.
My only recommendation for you, and what I try and do, is find a fret that fits back in that finish slot. You don't want to go over the old finish because it's all over the place. Just get back down to the wood and you'll be all right.
Oh, okay. That sounds good.
Yeah, I mean, often I have to tell clients that it's just like we're going with a thin fret again. There's, we're not putting a 105 on there or something like that. Unless they want me to sand down the board, and everybody says no. So
is that because of being afraid to break the finish putting them in?
it's not breaking the finish necessarily, but that the finish gets so uneven as it gets up to the fret on the old guitars.
Mhm.
You don't want to go over top of it because it'll never sit flat.
It kind of crests up to that and then has that
A little
nice
bit.
sharp
Yeah.
down into the slot cavern.
Yeah, so you really want to get it down into that cavity that's left by the finish, or the old fret in the finish.
A lot of those frets, I forget, are the Fender frets from 50s and 60s, are they roughly 80, or will 80 fit between there, do you think?
I think 80 is pretty close.
Is it pretty close?
78 to 83, somewhere in that range.
Yeah.
Depending on the guitar,
Think-
age, and whatever.
Last time I was looking at Jess car, it looked like they had a 78, but it's like 78 by 55 or some nonsense like that. Like it's like for one specific use, I think. Just too bad.
I mean, the way I typically size them on a vintage guitar is I will measure whatever that gap is in the lacquer, because undoubtedly whoever I'm doing frets for wants the widest fret possible. So I'll just measure whatever the space is and fit the fret to that.
Can I ask a question again? Connor here. Did Fender always lacquer over the frets, or is there an era where that started?
To the best of my knowledge, everything up until they went to poly was over top of the finish. I don't know that they sprayed over the frets at all in the 50s.
Okay. Not something I'm going to cross too often.
Tyler would probably be able to answer that better than me.
Tyler, what do you think about that?
So to my knowledge, they always sprayed over to some degree, but the stuff from the 50s is so thin that it usually chips away almost all the way to the side of the
All the
fret.
way
So
to the side of the fret,
it's just rarely something you have to deal with.
Yeah, in my experience, when you pull like the 50s fret wire, it seems like it does crescendo up to the fret as though there was a thicker film finish there, and then it's usually broken down into the slot where it fits. But cool.
So I've got one more, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So I think Ian touched on it really briefly, but lots of times, at least with me, when I'm filing, either the bevels or the frets to width, sometimes you'll get this nasty kind of swarf that will hang off, the T of the fret, that foil kind of shit that can be tough to get off. Do you have any tricks to deal with that?
I will go in there with a razor blade and just kind of pull it out. If you get it to sort of fold out and up and then just hit it with a diamond block, it'll sort of grind right off.
Tyler, lately I'll bevel right up until where I'm going to probably push that stuff into the board. That seems to be the most problem that I have with it, is when it gets pushed into the side of the fingerboard. I'll get right up to that, and then I'll just go down the line and stick my fingernail under there and just pop them all up, and then go the rest of the way. And it usually deals with it. But yeah, it's super annoying. The other thing too, I don't know if you saw, I've got a post a while back about those Grobet files that I use. Those really cut down on it too. The super coarse and the super fine files I use, like the super fine file is pretty, it's a pretty interesting file.
If you're using a tooth file, you can always reverse the file in your hand, and that goes a long way to cutting down on that.
Oh, is that right? Go the opposite direction?
If I'm using either one of these things, type of files. If I'm filing, I'll just take the file, flip it around backwards, and
Knocks it down.
foil.
Somebody asked what those files were that I use. It's the Grobet equaling file. It's O-cut and 4-cut. That's a good tip, Doug.
Another thing that I've had good luck with when you have those little flappies that are ruining your day is take a little dental pick, like the finest one you have, and you can just kind of flake it off a lot of the time.
Anybody else?
Yeah, this is Joe. I was watching Joe does he ever use glue is with seating frets?
Yeah. I tend not to put any glue in before I do the fret. I will seat the fret and get a feel for how it goes in. If I don't think the fret needs it, which I hope it doesn't, I won't put glue in. If I think the fret is going to come out, if I don't put glue in, that's kind of the only time I do it. And if I'm going to put glue in, it's going to be probably before I cut off the ends of the frets, and I'll come in with CA on the tang of the fret and let it wick down into the fret slot.
What if it has binding?
Same thing.
Okay.
And if it generally just wicks right past the binding. But if a little were to get on there, just beat Johnny on the spot and wipe it off.
Yeah. So this weekend I tried to, fit it without glue, and I really liked the results. And I went back and tilted the guitar and kind of wicked some glue in. The one was a banjo, and it had binding. And so I did not do that. I was just afraid of introducing CA to that binding.
Sure.
So it felt like it was seated right. They were tight to the binding, but I was just kind of curious. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Joe, I would say too, like if this wasn't a maple board and you had binding like on a rosewood or ebony board, you can get pretty good luck waxing off the board and then just wicking it in from the top.
Are you talking, Ian, about binding guitars or just any in general?
Oh, bound guitars. So maybe I'm misunderstanding, but if you have a bound guitar and you're trying to wick in, like I'm assuming like you've got the tang cut and maybe you're wicking it in from the crown. Was that what you were talking about?
Yeah. So I pressed hammered some binding, so with when I cut the tang, and it felt really good. But I was just, it's new. This technique is new to me. I'm always a fret glue guy. Just a couple dabs of CA on the two corners in the middle, but I felt really good about the fitting of it. So I just wasn't sure about the bound, but you're saying to use a little bit of, are you saying just to put a little coat or something on it so you can wick it in?
Yeah, so if you put like Brie wax, or it's been some time since I've used Johnson's paste wax to do it.
Paste wax?
Yeah, something like that. And also, like the way that I would do it is I would wick it in, then I would let it, get in there, but then I would kick it immediately. So it's not, because if you leave it on there, sometimes it'll penetrate the wax and you have a mess. But the other thing, if it does penetrate the wax just a little bit, which sometimes it does, on rosewood or ebony, you can come back with a Q-tip with acetone, and it'll pull that CA right off of there, and you'll get a pretty clean result.
Excellent. Thanks.
So, Joel, you deal with rosewood all the time, don't you? Do you ever work from the top, or?
No.
There you have it. I didn't use CA for a long time because it wound up being a fickle mistress, but I've reopened my heart to it recently.
So I've been using CA with the StuMag pipettes, and I've been getting a lot of mileage out of just cleaning them afterwards with acid, because I'm frugal, and so I hate to just use something, but I feel like I got a lot of mileage with those pipettes and just kind of the super fine glue boost CA. That's been my technique for the last couple months.
Yeah.
This pipette.
Yeah, the glue boost ultra runny, or whatever it's called. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. Any more questions?
Yeah, I've got a guitar that I'm trying not to refinish the neck on, and it's a maple one, but I think I need to kind of compression fit it, because as tight as it'll go, I can't get it straight. When you're working with things like compression fitting on a maple board that you're not then going to sand off, how are you making sure that you're getting it back to a straight point, before you then go into start doing any leveling, or is it just kind of guesswork?
I'm not sure I understood that. So you've got one that's got too much bow in it?
Yeah, so it's got up bow.
What kind of guitar is this?
It's a Strat. It's a USA sort of vintage reissue.
What era? Like 90s?
Yeah, 90s-ish, something like that. And truss rod adjustment at the heel.
Okay.
And it's as far as it'll go.
Okay.
And it won't, even without string tension, it won't go into a back bow.
Have you put washers on the rod?
Yep.
You've got a ton of washers on there now.
Yes.
Are you?
So my thought is compression fitting to get it into some sort of a back bow.
How much bow does this neck have without, any tension on the truss rod?
Without any tension on the truss rod.
Yeah.
I think the last measure, it looked around about sort of 20 thou. I'd have to give it another measure again.
So, Joel, you want to?
And the truss rod won't take out 20 thou of.
No, it's amazing. It literally seems to get to a point where it's tight. It creeps up a little bit and then just stops.
Still sounds like you're at the end of the threads on the rod.
It sounds like something is not functioning the way it ought to.
So vintage reissue, they didn't put any of those funky blocks in the middle of it, like the.
It should just be a straight
rod.
Yeah, I mean,
Andy, I would.
You know the big washers from StuMag, like the really deep ones.
No, I guess I don't.
I've put those in, and they're like what, 1/8 of an inch, something like that thick.
Have you gotten in there with a flashlight and just made sure that you're not at the that you've got plenty of thread still available?
No, I haven't.
Okay, and is the adjustment nut, is it protruding from the end of the fingerboard a lot?
It is when you've got the washer on there, yeah.
Huh.
That sounds like a mystery.
So one thing I'd say about this, Andy, is I would tell your customer you're wandering into non-standard waters first off, right off the bat.
I have
You-
told
you
him
don't-
that
Okay.
he is aware.
Okay. Daniel wants to know if you can bend the neck backwards and then put some tension on the
Nope.
rod. Do you get
I put
any?
it into a severe back bow overnight with no tension on it, actually over 2 days. I didn't hear anything go, no kind of truss rod sort of like resetting into anything. Then whilst it was under that tension, tightened it up as tight as I could get it without hoping to break the thing. And it still just popped back into this ever so slight back bow without any string tension on
Oh,
it.
wait. So it's back bow or up bow?
Up bow, sorry.
Okay, yeah, okay. Yeah, I gotta say, just from my own personal hunch making machine here, the idea that you're gonna counteract that after those measures with compression fretting is probably remote.
Right, okay.
Doug, what do you think?
I'm assuming we haven't overlooked cleaning the threads and lubricating the rod, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely put lubrication on the nuts and on the thread, and it all seems to be threading on ever so lovely. And going up to a point, it tightens up and it creeps up and it creeps up and it creeps up, and then it just gets to a point where.
Does it get to a point where it fails, or where it get to, then it goes into an up bow, or does it get to a point where you just can't tighten it anymore and it's not coming up anymore?
That's right. It gets to a point where you can't tighten anymore and it's not coming up anymore.
So have you measured how much travel with strings on the guitar the truss rod gives you?
What? So when there's strings on it, put the strings on.
How much?
Measure it with it loose and measure it with it tight.
Yeah. Well, in other words, how much relief travel do you have on that neck from when the truss rod's loose to when the truss rod's tight? So if you get the guitar strung up, loosen the truss rod. Oh, I'm at 36 thou relief, and then you tighten the truss rod as much as you can go without the string tension, and then restring up the guitar. And if you're only at 20 thousandths relief, you know you have a 15 thousandths travel or 16 thousandths travel with your truss rod. That's failing. Have we done that measurement?
I haven't done that measurement, no.
You want to know how much you're dealing with. You
Yeah.
know, because you have a improperly installed truss rod. If you have enough travel, if you're getting 20, 30, 40 thousandths of relief,
Yeah.
corrections, but it's stopping at 20 thou up bow.
Yeah.
Maybe I misunderstood, but I thought without any tension on it, without any tightness on the truss rod, it was at 20 thousandths of relief.
I think that's what he's saying, yeah.
No. So with it as tight as possible, with no string tension, it's about 20 thou.
Oh,
Okay,
okay.
with it as tight as possible. Okay.
So what is it?
What
What is
if
it
you lose
completely loose?
Yeah.
I haven't done that measurement. I'd have to make that.
So,
Okay.
and so.
There's definitely movement, but
So,
not a lot.
and then, so if you have string tension on it and the truss rod dimed out, how much relief does it have?
Not a lot more. To be honest with you, it's very stable. It doesn't want to move.
No, it's just stuck in that position. Have you?
Yeah, it's almost like it's stuck. It doesn't seem to want to move a lot at all.
It could be stuck. Have you? I might try taking the nut off and then putting a punch on the end of that rod, and just giving it a few whacks, or maybe leave the nut on since it's proud of it, and just give that nut a few whacks.
All right. Okay.
And maybe also, I don't know, maybe put one of those, not a soldering pencil, but a soldering gun to the end of it, maybe would heat it up, heat that, if it was, only if it was loose on the very end or tight on the very end, would it do it? But you might give it a couple taps.
Okay.
You might try a little heat.
Yeah, I just kind of thought that compression fretting it would give me the backbow to then loosen the
Well,
truss rod off. And
it can, but if it's resistant to move at all with the truss rod, then I mean, compression fretting is not gonna do
gonna cut
much.
okay.
However, you know, taking the frets out and blasting the relief out of the board, you'd probably get fairly good results with that, I would think.
Yeah, I mean, if the neck is reasonably stable as it is, leveling the fretboard out now, you'd probably be in good shape.
Yeah, I said it was just this because it was on the maple thing, like trying to keep the maple fretboard without doing that and looking for other options.
So you're just trying to get out of hard work, aren't you, Andy?
Absolutely.
Well, you come to the right place. Any other questions? Dan Earlywine, come on, hop in. I'm tagging you in, Dan. You got any observations about that neck? You've seen a million faces and rocked a significant portion of them.
You're talking to me?
That's right. The distinguished gentleman from the great state of Ohio.
I would take the neck off the body or assume that it is, and I would clamp in the vise down at the body end, and I would loosen the truss rod and I would clamp the neck into a back bow, a steep one, and then I would tighten the rod.
Yeah, I've done that.
He's done it. He says.
And I would probably take the StuMac tool, the StuMac rescue kit, and I would bore around that rod and deepen the hole and get on some fresh threads down in there. There's always threads there. And I would deepen it quite a bit and get on fresh threads and then put my washer in so that when it was really tight, it didn't stick out the butt end of the neck and it would fit back in the body. And that might work. I mean,
That's a good idea.
it works for me a lot.
Okay.
That's a good idea.
That tool.
What, so use the washer to build it back up, but have a little bit of fresh thread that you.
Yeah, so that truss rod rescue tool, Dan, that's like a die, right? Like it's a die that both bores new material and puts new thread on the rod at the same time.
It's two separate tools. One of them is just a cutter on the face, and you can deepen the hole an inch deep.
Yeah.
Then you can chase it with the die, probably a 1032.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I've just looked at how much they are.
Yeah.
Andy, where are you?
Dan, what's your cut on those?
Look at that.
Andy, you're in the States?
No, in the UK.
Oh, you're in the UK. I'd say I'll just send you it to use if you want. Like, rarely. I mean, I just had to do this on a Jazzmaster neck.
Yeah.
I just had to cut a little bit deeper to give me more threads. Threads were kind of fucked up at the end, and the nut was wanting to slide. Like it felt like it would get tension.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't grip. And so you just had to cut deeper. And almost all Fender necks. I missed the very beginning where you even said what guitar you're working on. I didn't even know what this neck's from.
It sounds like 90s.
Yeah, it's a reissue strap.
Oh yeah. There's almost always deeper thread. And so you just got to cut the wood away. And this has, I mean, it's a complicated cutter to make, but it's a simple tool. You just bore that wood back a little bit. So
Andy, how tight are you getting the nut?
They do make a nut that's an inch long, so you can bore that hole quite deep and then use a different nut on it.
Oh, they make a deeper nut.
Put on a deeper nut. Yeah. That gives you thread back further down the rod.
That's all well and good, assuming that the nut is actually spinning on the truss rod to some extent. How tight are you getting that nut?
Really tight.
Okay. So
like your truss rod spanner, and to the point like I could put significant force on it and it will not move.
Okay. So I don't think threads are your issue.
That's both with and without washers.
Right.
Okay.
And the nut, you know, the thread is good inside the nut. Have you taken just a bolt, whatever it is, 1032, or I forget what thread would be on that reissue. Have you
Yeah,
just
everything's threading up really,
good.
really nice.
Yeah.
Because when I put the washer on it, it's sticking out the back of the neck. And when I don't put the washer on it, I can get it the same amount of tightness and it sits flush to the neck.
You know what we'll do? We'll take a look at this on the loose along tomorrow
Yeah,
when
sure.
you're in the shop.
I think the one equation that you're still missing is how much action you have on the truss rod. There's your answer.
Yeah.
It's already moving as much as you need it, then the problem is in the board, not in the rod.
Yes,
Okay.
I agree.
All right. Well, I thought it was a bit more relevant to the refretting maple, but
No, it is. It is. And, you know, like, God forbid you got to take the lacquer off this board. Now you know how Joel puts the frets back in. He just puts them right back in.
yeah,
Yep.
that is. All right. I'll let somebody else take over.
That's all right. Anybody else?
I have a question.
Yes, Dan.
Hey, Joel or Ian, anybody, when you're taking frets out for the first time on a really old maple neck, do you pull them or drive them out sideways?
I tend to pull them. I've certainly driven plenty out sideways. I think the sort of danger of knocking the edge out of the side of the fretboard is just as bad as pulling up wood. I don't see what the benefit is, especially if you're unfortunate to slip off the fret while you're trying to drive it out.
Yeah.
That gets real bad.
Yeah.
Been there.
A follow-up to that, heat or no heat?
On maple, no heat.
Okay.
No heat.
I mean, you could be really ginger with it, but at that temperature, I don't know what you gain out of it.
Joel, are you using the chip guards from the feeler gauge with slot in it?
I have them somewhere. I've probably used them once or twice, but in general, no.
But you've got those crazy new fret pullers that are very,
Yeah.
seems like they're,
Well, I love these guys. Stumac sells these, and they're fantastic. And I've actually ground these down a little bit flatter and polished them a bit. They take frets out with almost no damage to the finish at all. They're wonderful.
yeah.
And you know, I have a variety of. I mean, these are cutters, but I've again ground them and polished them down to they're almost perfectly flat. It's great at getting frets out.
You ever pull frets with the cutters?
No.
That'd be, you have to call for a big fret there. Anybody else? Dan, that was a good one. So heat. We've got sideways frets. So you're not a big fan of pulling them sideways. I have when I first learned about the sideways fretting, I was popping them out and oh boy, it was glorious. And then I did have one where it just took the side of the fingerboard and just obliterated it, and spent, a couple hours trying to get the chip back in and touch it up and stuff. And so, and what's funny is before that I pulled a bunch of them, fairly successfully through the top. What about old dry rosewood? Do you do anything like on old dry rosewood?
Only if it's been glued in. Which a lot of Gibsons, had glue in them and whatnot.
Yeah. So no heat ever unless there's glue?
I've never seen a reason to.
Okay. Very cool. You heard it here.
I don't have a question, but I have like a comment regarding the pulling it up versus driving it out sideways.
Uh-huh.
I don't remember if I talked to you about it, Ian, but I did talk to Trevor Healy. I had to refret an old Jazzmaster that was bound and was rosewood. So they went in sideways, but there was binding on
But
it.
they bound over it. Oh, fine.
So I did the like wet paper towel with a soldering iron to force a little bit of steam down into this rosewood, and I had like practically zero chip out, and this was kind of a fucked up old dry rosewood board. So just in case anyone has a scary moment,
Yeah.
that worked out like perfectly for me. I was a little sketched out, but no badness.
Awesome.
Anybody pre-oil their exotic hardwood boards before, if they think they're dry, before a refret? I might be the only one that does that. It seems a little counterintuitive because you don't want to like fret into oil, but in case
think
you
it
have
would-
to use glue,
It
but
helps swell the wood just a little bit.
yeah. So you do pre-oil a little bit sometimes?
I don't
Okay,
know who would do that.
I do it. I do it.
Joel, are you charging extra for maple boards, or are you a flat rate guy?
Oh, hell yes. Lots. Especially if it's vintage, especially if, oh, I don't want you to touch the dirt on my fingerboard. I want it all there. Yeah. Charge a lot more.
A lot more. You heard it here first, people. Charge a
one-
lot more.
One
Well
more.
said too.
This might be more of an amateur question, but so you said no heat unless there's glue. How do you know there's glue other than just maybe pulling a fret and seeing what's down in there?
Yeah, for me, it's typically pulling a fret. So usually towards the end of the fretboard where someone may not notice if I mess up a little bit.
Okay.
Or if I need to clean something up, it's, not in the first 7, 9 frets, so forth. And yeah, I'll look at that.
All right. Thank you.
I've got one. How about on like classical or flamenco guitar where that last fret is on the concave end of a fretboard, sound hole cuts through it, you got a split fret, you're trying to dress those long tapered ends. Any tricks there? How you guys splitting that last fret?
Ask that guy.
Well,
Put them in.
sometimes like I haven't done a lot of classicals, but I think probably maybe an analog would be like an F5 mandolin on the fingerboard extension, kind of where the teat comes in on that. So I basically just shape them off and then put them in. Whatever shape is going to be in there, I do my best to do it off of the instrument and then press them in finished.
Makes
I've
sense.
got an Antonio Bernal flamenco that's just got like they turn into darts. I mean, it's like the fret goes right at that.
Yeah.
flat race.
I've made some darts on F5 mandolins for sure. And it's not how anybody else does them. Like if you look at like high-end F5s, like everybody just kind of does like a at the end there. But if it was to really follow the binding, it would be a bit of a dart.
Hey, Dan? You still there, Dan?
This Dan or the other Dan?
Yeah, Dan, who just asked the question.
Yeah, I'm here.
You have one of these?
Oh, that's such a,
Wait, is that the one that flattens or the one that?
no, that's the bender.
Yes. Take your fret that you're putting into the curved fingerboard on the classical guitar, hold one of these, the part of it that comes out. Part of it that comes out there,
Yeah.
you can shape that into the curve on your belt sander. On the
Yeah.
belt
There we
sander.
go.
You get just to the right curve that you want to match that part of the finger.
By the way, can you have my fret?
Then when you're done, you cut this part of the fret to size, you install it, you can shape the other end of the board that's on the outside of the fingerboard, just like you do every other fret. This one's already taken care of.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Stu Mac doesn't sell those fret bending pliers anymore.
They don't?
No, they don't.
Really?
No, or maybe they might have reissued them, but
I think
mine
they did. I
went
got a set not too long ago.
Mine went missing.
He's got it.
So, but you can also like grab, this is, the fret cutters are a good way to grab frets as well. Just grab them like that. Manipulate them.
I think
don't know.
mine's the wrong style, right, Doug? Mine's got the.
That's a
two-
that's a crimper.
That's a crimper. That's a different thing than your.
Yeah.
I'll find a way. I can like you just showed Ian. Hold them with
Yeah. The other thing too is it's surprisingly easy to put a notch the size of a tang into a set of pliers. I've done it before. So I used a hacksaw and a regular pair of pliers, and you don't even really need the crown recess in there.
So they sell the fret bending tool.
They
Oh,
are
they do.
reissued and they are expensive.
Yeah. Well, mine had a blue handle instead of red and said channel lock on them. All right.
Thanks,
Should we-
guys.
Should we wrap it up, fellas? Everybody? Oh. What was that?
I said thanks, Joe. That's all.
Yeah, can everybody unmute and tell Joel you said thanks?
Thank you, Joel.
Thank you, Joel.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you guys.
Thanks, Joel.